Hello and welcome, you're listening to Fresh Rubber. This week we are recapping the events, the highs, the lows, the intrigue and all the excitement of the 2025 Italian Grand Prix. Unfortunately this week Gavin is unwell, he's copped a bout of the flu, so he's out of action and you're just with me today. So let's see how we go with the solo episode. Don't be too hard on me, we shall see how it goes. Well, I think when we look back at the 2025 Italian Grand Prix, there probably won't be too many out there that say it was a classic. It was the shortest race apparently in F1 history, but it did deliver some on-track action, and certainly the main talking points of this round were the McLaren orders issue with the bad pit stop for Lando Norris and the McLaren team swapping drivers on track at the end of the race, and also, of course, Max Verstappen getting in the way yet again. The Joker strikes again. So let's dive right into it. This season so far, we've referred to Max Verstappen as the Joker in the pack. What do we mean by that? The McLaren drivers are clearly in a dominant season. They have won most of the races this year, and they are looking to be the only ones in contention for the title this year. That much is unquestionable. But Max Verstappen does not give up easy. He's the fourth-time reigning world champion, and he's not interested in just sitting this season out to see what happens and biding his time for next year. He is going hammer and tongs trying to win races and to cause a headache for those two McLaren boys. And this weekend he did it yet again. He was in his comfortable, happy place. The car was performing as he liked it, a lot more balanced than it had been. After the race, he made some commentary about the change in approach that Laurent Mekies has brought as team principal with his engineering background. So Max was clearly in a much happier place this round, and that showed in the timings. So he was in the top 5 or 6 in all 3 practice sessions. He was either first or second in the 3 quali sessions. He got pole position and won the race. So he was a happy camper this weekend, and that often is what makes the difference. When Max is on it, when he's in the pocket, when he's in the zone and the car is under him, he's got the performance that he needs, he's going to deliver. And so that's exactly what he did this time around. And Lando Norris must be kicking himself, because this is the second race this season where he has broken the lap record for the circuit and not got pole position in that session when he's in qualifying. So Lando must be thinking, what on earth do I need to do in order to succeed at this game? But with Max Verstappen coming in at pole and winning from pole position, this essentially lost points for Norris, because he could have been coming in first, getting 25 points for the win, with Piastri coming second in 18, so that's a 7-point difference. As it turns out, he finished second, with Piastri finishing third, only 3 points difference between them. So Lando Norris was able to finish ahead, but not necessarily in the easiest of circumstances. But we'll come to that. Sticking with Max for a moment longer, this is just his 3rd win of the season, which feels sort of strange when you think back to how dominant he was in the years gone by. Seeing the Max Verstappen podcast, the Max Lambiase podcast come on at the end of the race again was kind of nice in a way. You know, it's nice to see Max back in front again after a bit of a time out of the limelight. But this is just his 3rd win from the season, and actually his 2nd win when he's been on pole position. If you recall back to Suzuka in round 3, he was on pole and he held off the McLaren boys right up until the end of that race, finishing first. At the Emilia-Romagna race, he managed to overtake Piastri coming into turn 1 and then was unbeatable from there. So Max has still got it, showing us his class, and the 2nd time he's won from pole in 2025. And so far, I have to say Max is looking pretty good to finish 3rd in the standings this year, which is very sad news for me, because I think I bet Gavin a seafood dinner that George Russell would pip Max Verstappen to P3 in the driver's standing. So we'll see what happens there. We'll come back to Russell a little bit later on. But yeah, Max has this uncanny ability to pop up where you don't want him to be, and he played the Joker in the pack role beautifully this weekend. The other big talking point of this weekend was what happened at the end of the race with the McLaren Papaya rules. So this was a talking point that really overshadowed the whole event, I think. And if you look at the chatter online afterwards, it's caused a lot of divide in the F1 fan community. I was amused watching the drivers' press conference after the race with the top 3 podium finishes. I think it was every second question had something to do with the Papaya rules and how to interpret them and what to make of this for the rest of the season, with Max sitting in the middle thinking, not my problem. You guys can keep going after it. With his line of questioning, not my problem. Kind of hilarious. But what actually happened? Let's dive in. So about halfway through the race, up until that point, Norris, Piastri and Leclerc had been separated by between 4 and 6 seconds pretty much throughout the race up until that point. And they were all going long. Everyone was thinking, what about a safety car, and holding off on their pit stops. But they were separated by about the same distance on track when Ferrari brought Leclerc in for his first and only pit stop. And at that point, McLaren started thinking, okay, well, what about the undercut? Let's just keep an eye on this. And whilst Leclerc was on fresh rubber, he was gaining on Piastri. He closed that gap by about 2 or 3 seconds. And so in response to that, by around lap 40, McLaren started talking to both drivers about the pit window and thinking it might be the right time to bring in Piastri, rather than bringing in Norris. Norris would normally get priority pit stop, come in first since he was ahead on track, but out of concern for Piastri and the risk of being undercut by Leclerc, who'd stopped earlier, they thought, well, let's bring in Piastri first. Piastri comes in, has a nice clean stop, 1.9 seconds if I'm not mistaken, and out he goes on track. So far, so good. The very next lap, they bring in Norris, and something goes wrong with the front left wheel gun. The guy doesn't see the signal, or something goes wrong. Second, it wasted time in the pits, and here we see Piastri zooming down that start-finish straight, and ends up half a second in front of Norris after the pit stop. So he had been around 5 or 6 seconds behind, but thanks to Norris's incredibly slow pit stop, he winds up ahead. A lap or two goes by from this point, and the engineers come on the radio and say to Piastri, we pitted you first for team reasons. We think it's fair for you to swap positions with Norris because he was ahead, and now he's behind you through no fault or choice of his own. Piastri comes back on the radio and says, I thought we agreed that a slow pit stop was just part of racing. But if you guys really want me to do this, then I will. Shortly after that, they do. They make they invert the cars on track. The race goes on, and Norris finishes ahead, finishes P2, Piastri P3. Incidentally, this is the first race in probably in quite a long time when the first 5 drivers finished in the same order that they started. It was first through 5th. The only one who mucked up this order was Hamilton, who had qualified 5th but dropped to P10 for a 5-place grid penalty from a infringement from the Zandvoort formation lap. No, not formation lap. The lap to the grid where he drove too fast through a yellow flag zone. Where was I? So Norris ends up finishing P2. Piastri ends up finishing P3. So what to make of this? I've been observing the different opinions on this in the last few days, and I've had a chance to scratch my head and think about it a bit. I think ultimately it was the right decision for them to swap drivers on track, and I think Piastri comes out looking pretty clean in this. Norris doesn't look bad, but in terms of the decision to go ahead with this, here's why I think that. Yes, they are in a title fight, and every point will matter, but Piastri actually made this point in the drivers' press conference afterwards. What they all want at McLaren is not just success here and now. They want to win, and win for a long time. And anything that stands to destabilize that kind of the good harmony, the good culture that they've established in that team, the disharmony potential between the two drivers and the two sides of the garage is something to be concerned about, and it's worth a lot more pain than the loss of 3 points on track. So swapping places, losing the 3 points, it might be a little bit painful, but it's not as bad as it would be if actually that team kind of crumbled. And when you look back at the history of McLaren, they've got a bit of previous on this. They've had moments where they're two drivers going head to head, fairly evenly matched, and the team culture just went to pieces. So you can see the logic there. It's the big picture that they're going for. Now, do I think it was the fair decision in the moment? I think it was the right decision to do that on track, but do I think it was fair? No, I don't. I don't think it was fair in both cases. Let's take a look at Piastri. So Piastri was brought in earlier than Norris because of the concern of the undercut from Leclerc. So when you think about it that way, he actually did stand to lose if he didn't come in when he did, because there was the risk that that Leclerc could have undercut him, and then instead of it being a 3-point loss to Norris, it would have been more like a 6-point loss because he would have finished P4. Would have been nice actually to see a Leclerc P3 podium finish, considering the Ferrari home race. That would have been quite nice, but it wasn't to be. So for Piastri, the bringing him in was to protect him. Where am I going with this? Let's see. For Norris, when he came in, he had a bad pit stop. That was bad luck for him. It's not Piastri's fault that Norris had a bad pit stop. I don't think you can say also that if Piastri had come in second, that he would have had a bad pit stop. It wasn't an inevitability that it would have ended up that way, that Norris would have gone in, had the 1.9 second pit stop, and Piastri would have had the bad stop. They are in a title fight, and at the end of the season, those 3 points might actually make all the difference. Piastri might, despite what he says, he might regret following those team orders. We also don't know what they've agreed to behind the scenes. Do the Papaya rules actually say slow pit stop caused by the team, front left jack person, or not jack, front left wheel gun person, if they mess up, that's just part of racing? We don't know. And it's frankly a little bit annoying to be doing this kind of rules lawyering, trying to read the tea leaves and figure out what's going on behind the scenes at McLaren. I kind of find that a little bit annoying, if I'm honest. But where was I? Piastri. I think it was unfair for him to be asked to come in and correct an error or a mistake that happened that was out of his control. I think that was unfair. But he chose to comply. There you go. How about Norris? How was it poor on him? I think it was a little bit unfair on Norris as well, considering that the reason why they pitted him second was to protect his teammate, and he was the one who came out worse for it. On the radio before he came into the pits, he actually said, pit him first, him being Piastri, so long as it's not an undercut. And then you're watching the timing, you're seeing Piastri coming around the parabolica and thinking, oh dear, here it comes. He's going to end up getting undercut just through the slow pit stop. So I think it was unfair on Norris as well. Also unfair in a way for him to be placed in a situation where the team asking Piastri to swap positions could have blowback on Norris. It could make him look like the unsporting, whinging driver. I don't think that's fair. So where do I sit ultimately? I think it was the right call. As I've said, it was the right call. Swap them back. It was a very minimal damage to Piastri. And maybe another perspective on this is it kind of does keep Norris in the title fight. If it had been the other way around and it had been Piastri finishing P2, that gap would have been 37 points. It's sort of getting up towards the not really viable for Norris to be in the championship fight anymore point. So, maybe McLaren were also thinking about us. They're thinking about what they could do to help us keep that title fight alive. So I suppose we should be grateful to McLaren. another thought that I have on this, stepping away from that specific incident now, is the Papaya rules. I don't know why we hook ourselves so much on this Papaya rules thing when it's other teams that do similar things. We just call it team orders. We treat other teams differently. If I think about, say, Ferrari, for example, they've had moments this year where they've asked the drivers to swap positions. We don't have a name for that. We don't have a Ferrari scarlet red rules. We don't have some thing that we use to refer to that. It doesn't have this brand. We just call it team orders, I suppose. If we look at Red Bull, we know that if they asked Max Verstappen to do the same, he would just say, no. He's done that in the past. I'm not going to play that game. Don't ask me again. We don't have team orders at Red Bull, except when it comes to the second driver, perhaps. We know that if it was Yuki, well, it probably wouldn't ever be Yuki in that position being asked to swap places, although we have seen that with Perez in the past. I don't know. There's something about McLaren and the way that they've approached instructing their drivers and giving them room to race, which I find so refreshing. Except we end up having these endless discussions about what are in and what are out of the Papaya rules. A little bit like the racing rules debacle that we're in at the moment, where if you're ahead at the apex, but only by half a millimeter, then you win the corner. And if someone else is on the outside, then it's a totally different set of rules. To me, I find it really hard to follow, and especially hard to follow whilst it's unfolding on track in front of you. To the point where I think, have we actually just, have we thrown the baby out with the bathwater? Should we just go back to a bit more of a simpler time when it was a simple rule like you must always leave the space? Something like that. I think maybe that would be perhaps a better situation. There you go. I guess the question I've got for you, Gavin, since you can't be here to have this debate and tell me where I'm wrong, is do you think that bad pit stops are just a part of racing? Is that just the rub of the green? It's the luck of the draw. You either get it, you don't. Like a safety car, we talked about that last time around, or perhaps an engine failure. Are these just part of the big old grab bag of luck that we get in motorsports? Don't know. What do you think? Let's talk about it next time. Moving on. Sticking with McLaren ever so slightly longer. This is kind of cool. Oscar Piastri extends his streak of consecutive points finishes. He now moves up to third on the all-time list of consecutive F1 points finishes with 34 races of consecutive points finishes. That's a fun stat to keep saying. But I'll keep saying it as he keeps finishing in the points. If he has a DNF or finishes P11 or lower, then I guess that streak will come to an end. But so far, so good. It doesn't look like it's going to show any sign of slowing down until the end of the season. I might have just done the commentator's curse? Let's see. Is there a podcaster's curse? Let's find out. Lando once again sets the new lap record but doesn't get pole position. Must be so frustrating that, especially when you build up to it all throughout the weekend. Session by session, you're doing this slow, gradual progression, building, getting to know the track, dialing in your setup, figuring out what each of the tyres can deliver, and then bringing it all out in that ever so important Q3 session, doing it, actually achieving what you set out to do, and then 3 seconds later, along comes Max Verstappen and says, yoink, I'll take that, thank you. Frustrating. But once again, it was Norris's round. He was so solid all throughout. Piastri was actually a little bit shaky, and I don't think you can put that all down to missing FP1 with Alex Dunn subbing in for him in that session. I think Piastri's so good, so tight, and such a solid driver that missing one session isn't going to be the make or break for him. But it seems like another round running where Piastri's been on the back foot, but still managed to make the most of a bad situation. Okay, moving on. What else is there? George Russell, said we'd come back to him. George just keeps plugging away. being Mr. Consistent, but on Sunday this time round, this season, another P5 finish for him. What else is there to say? He had a pretty quiet race. I don't think anyone really noticed much to do with Russell. Still not good enough to get P3 in the driver's standings, so there you go. Better race weekend than his teammate, so let's go to that next. Dear. Kimi Antonelli, I think he might be forming a bit of a Max Verstappen circa 2016 sort of reputation, being aggressive, maybe a little bit erratic. Gosh, his rookie season. So I think also it's the most penalty seconds applied to a rookie driver this season, and 1 penalty point for erratic driving in his battle with Alex Albon. Toto Wolff called his race underwhelming afterwards, and I think you could actually apply that to the whole race weekend. He was off in the gravel in FP2, so sort of exploring the surrounds of the Monza circuit. And then it's possible that Alex Albon thinks that maybe Lewis Hamilton actually left a little bit of further racing instruction in his motorhome, considering how often Lewis and Alex had moments on track coming together in their time in the past. Yeah, I don't know. I think it was good that he finished at least in the points, despite the penalty that was applied later in the race. He still managed to finish second. Didn't finish second. He's finished 9th with 2 points at the end of the race. Let's see. Is that right? Fact check myself. Yes, P9. 2 points. Not the worst outcome, although he has been jumped in the driver's standings now by Alex Albon. So he's 4 points behind Alex Albon. Alex just keeps having a solid season when the car is beneath him, and he's able to pull it together. You know, what more to say than that? He's the quiet performer who doesn't give up easily. And another thing I've noticed about Alex is that he's often very thoughtful in his responses. If you ever see interviews with Alex after a session, he usually has a lot of insight to bring to that. Whereas some other drivers, I don't know, they just talk in generalities, or they don't give you much information. So a lot of respect for Alex. But still, I'd like Antonelli to finish ahead of him in the standings. So there you go. That's fandom for you. Looking at the Ferrari drivers, both Leclerc and Hamilton seem to be finding their groove. You know, getting back into the swing of things. They were able to pull it together, coming in 4th and 5th in the qualifying in Q3, and separated by just a 10th. So I think in terms of the season trajectory, I would say Lewis Hamilton's probably happy with how things are going. Not obviously where it needs to be, but certainly getting closer to his teammate and also closer to the front. And both of those two things are good. He seemed pretty chirpy after the race. Didn't have that much to do once he'd made up the ground that he'd lost through the grid drop. So, you know, happy outcome. Not quite on the podium, but, you know, pretty close. Who else had a good weekend? I think you could say that Isaac Hadjar had one of those interesting weekends where it's a bit like a Melbourne day, you know, all seasons in one day. For Isaac, he was knocked out in Q1, and in a way, it was like the old Isaac was back. I remember hearing him screaming into the radio during his F2 days, and for me, that was nice. You know, good to see that emotion come back. And to see the old Isaac back on the radio again. But the weird thing about that was that in his F2 days, he was actually incredibly fast. And so you often wouldn't see him getting such poor qualifying results. But I think, interestingly enough, Racing Bulls took the opportunity to do a few Parc Fermé changes. So they did a power unit swap. So he started from the pit lane, but actually managed to make up all that ground and more, and ended up finishing 10th. So he came home with one point for his troubles, and seemed quite happy. He said after the race, "I knew I had the car under me. I knew it was capable of doing what it did. He just needed to believe in himself, I suppose, and put it all together." And then, so with 1 point, 1 point for his efforts, he's now sitting just behind Antonelli, P9 in the driver's standings. And I suppose you could say he's at risk now of being promoted to the Red Bull second seat for the 2026 season. Curiously, it was funny to watch the media try and pin down Red Bull CEO Laurent Mekies this weekend, trying to get a straight answer from him as to whether or not Yuki Tsunoda would be in the Red Bull Racing family in 2026, not just in the Red Bull Racing in the main team partnering Max, but whether or not he would be dropped from Racing Bulls as well next year, which is, I think, seeming a little bit more likely than it might have at the start of the season. What a terrible outcome this season has been for Yuki. He's gone from the guy who was always overlooked, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, and in a way had been untested in the top team. Clearly he was a good midfield driver. Clearly he had what it took to lead the Racing Bulls team. He pretty much wiped the floor with everyone who'd come up against him, but put him into that Red Bull drive alongside Max in a year where it appears that Red Bull had lost their way and were making changes that were not beneficial, and even Max was struggling with. And Yuki's stock has just plummeted. Not only is he looking to lose his seat, he's also looking to lose potentially his driving F1 altogether, because Red Bull have talent coming through. They've got Arvid Lindblad, who's in the wings, and potentially could take the step up into the Racing Bulls F1 seat next year. So what is Yuki to do? Yeah, very sad. I would say that's talent wasted for Yuki, and I hope he finds something else to occupy him with in the year and years ahead. What else can we say about the Italian Grand Prix? The 2025 Italian Grand Prix. I think it was a pretty dull race from aside from the main, storylines that came out of it. It was a pretty stock standard single stop race. Even the one mechanical retirement that we had in the race from Fernando Alonso, even he had the good grace to stop for fresh rubber before retiring. I don't think I've seen that kind of mechanical failure in F1 in the last 5 years. I mean, when was the last time we saw someone retire from a race with a suspension failure, and as spectacular as a suspension failure as that? It still didn't bring out the safety car, which is baffling in some way, considering how quickly they brought out the safety car during Zandvoort last round. So that was interesting. I love the Italian national anthem. I think it's got something in it that tickles my soul. I love listening to it, and I also love at the end of the Italian national anthem when those fighter jets just zoom down over the start-finish straight with the Italian the flag colours in that trailing behind them. I just love that. I think that gives me goosebumps every time I see it. I love watching Nico Rosberg make Martin Brundle's life incredibly difficult on that grid walk. The Monza circuit is brilliant. I really wish we could have that banked section back on the grid. I think that would be amazing if we could somehow reinstate that banked circuit and truly get ourselves the Temple of Speed. Monza is that. It was the shortest F1 race in F1 history. It would be cool if we could get that incredibly steep bank section coming back. If you ever have a chance to look at photos of people standing on that bank section, you can see just how steep it is. It doesn't look that steep aside from that, but if you see a person there on the angle, man, it's crazy. Let's see, what else is there to talk about? This was, I guess, this was a bit of a palate palate cleanser. Coming up next round, we move on to Azerbaijan and Singapore, two temporary street circuits that offer very different style of racing, that offer, in the case of, I suppose, Azerbaijan, that offer that incredible high top speed and a similar type of slipstream DRS effect that you get down that incredibly long sort of straight section, but then also require a lot of downforce levels for the tight, twisty castle section and those 90-degree turns. And then, of course, you get Singapore, which is completely different in that you need lots more downforce because of the tight street circuit nature, but then you also get the dirty air. It just lingers and lingers because the walls are so close to you as you're driving around. So very different races coming up in the next few weeks, and it will be interesting to see if McLaren can reinstate their weekend dominance. I think with a driver as talented as Lando Norris clearly is, it's a good chance that they'll be able to sort of wring the neck of whatever machine they bring there. But it's interesting, we haven't seen the kind of clear out and out favourite that we have in the past for the McLaren team. They've not been, they certainly did not dominate at Monza as we thought they didn't dominate in Monza as we've seen them dominate at previous rounds this year. So, if nothing else, I suppose the Italian Grand Prix this year gave us a different winner, a third win for Max Verstappen, so we can be grateful for that. And it keeps our title fight hopes alive for those McLaren drivers. So, we shall see. Well, I think that's about all I've got to say about the Italian Grand Prix. I think that's the longest I've ever spoke into the microphone by myself. So, Gavin, I hope you think I did all right. And next time we get on the pod together, you can tell me all the points you think I got wrong and how unfairly overlooked someone like, I don't know, Liam Lawson is. So you can tell me how wrong I was. Oh, speaking of, Lawson's not a rookie, but speaking of performers, Gabriel Bortoleto. That's fantastic. I love seeing these rookies do well. Bortoleto came home in 8th, Antonelli in 9th, and Hadjar in 10th. So I think the future is bright. We've got these brilliant talents on the grid now, and if they get the car underneath them that they need in order to perform, they are going to continue on this journey. It's exciting. Bortoleto, can't wait for the Brazilian Grand Prix later this year. That's going to be great. Well, that's all for now. It's been fun riffing on the Italian Grand Prix on my own, talking to a microphone by myself. This time, I guarantee there'll be no audio loss due to internet woes. So at least there's that. Well, until next time, enjoy yourself. Keep an eye out for that Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and I will catch you next time. Actually, while I've got you, if you've made it this far into the podcast, you must clearly be enjoying the ramblings of this guy today and these guys in general. So I have a request for you. If you made it this far and you're enjoying what you're listening to, can you please recommend Fresh Rubber to a friend? It's free. It's easy to do. If you know someone who's as mad keen on F1 as you are, and as we are, clearly, let them know about this podcast. It's a great thing, podcasting, having it in your ears while you're washing the dishes, walking the dog, or doing whatever it is that you do in your downtime. And we would love to share some of that downtime with you in our ramblings about this sport that we all know and love. So, yeah, it's cheap, free, easy to do. Give it a go. Well, until next time, we will leave it there, bid you farewell, and we'll catch you for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix review in just a couple of weeks' time.